Welcome to our new episode of Fiction Prescriptions. I'm Ella Berthoud and I'm a bibliotherapist.
And I'm Isabelle Dupuy and I'm a writer. Today we're going to talk about food. Ella, how was your relationship with food when you were young? What are your earliest memories of you and food?
So I have a pretty bizarre food childhood. My parents were diplomats, so they were constantly cooking amazing feasts, which were very complicated. And my mum loved cooking, and she would go into the kitchen for days on end and create amazing repasts, which were often themed. So she'd have a theme of a member of the royal family or a colour theme, and she'd create all these sort of piles of meringues that had swirly rainbow colours in them. And I would be her assistant, as I was the only girl, one of 4 kids, 3 brothers, and we lived in a sexist world. And so I would be assisting her making these incredible foods. So I thought it was really normal to be making very complex meals all the time. And it was only really when I left home and I started constantly trying to cook for all my friends with these very extravagant recipes that I realized, oh, this is not actually normal. So it was quite strange. How about you? What about your earliest childhood food memories?
Well, I grew up in Haiti, and in Haiti, one of the funny things was that we had American television. To be honest, it was often half pirated, but we had American commercials on TV. And of course, we grew up eating Haitian food. The food is very good in Haiti. It's probably the best Caribbean food. It's a good mixture of Caribbean, African, French tradition. A lot of respect for food. But I was fascinated by commercials for McDonald's and Burger King, where they would show you these flaming burgers, on some grill, and they were not in Haiti. So I remember that the first time I finally made it out of Haiti when I was 11 and I went to Montreal, I was dying to go eat at McDonald's. And when my aunt took me there, I ate everything. I ate a Big Mac, I ate a milkshake, I ate fries, I ate, I don't know, probably like how do you call it, a filet of fish and all of these things. And I thought it was the best meal ever, and I was very happy.
We were also talking about food memories from fiction, because I have a very intense memory from the first novel I ever read to myself, which was 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith. And in that book, the dogs are on their way, the dog couple are on their way to look for their puppies, their stolen puppies, and they come to a posh country house. And in that posh country house, there's an old gentleman who toasts toast on a stick, and he's doing it for himself, and then he puts butter on it and eats it. And they're sitting behind him, behind his chair, unknown to him, salivating. And I really remember salivating when I was reading that book, and I became obsessed with hot buttered toast. And the old gentleman does give the hot buttered toast to the dogs, and it's a really lovely scene. And I have a lot of intense food memories from childhood books. You said you don't so much.
Well, I was thinking about it, and actually, I remember, this is a very generic one as well, but reading a lot of Asterix and the feast at the end of each Asterix and Obelix adventure, which features a roast boar and a huge,
very
a
carnivorous
cornucopia of food and potatoes and everything. And the potatoes, the vegetables didn't really attract me, but the roast boar always interested me.
Yes.
And in Haiti, we do eat a lot of pork. Not cooked like that, more kind of, either shredded or cut in small pieces and fried. But I always loved pork from there. And
yes, I remember drooling over that feast as well. Also, Tarzan, I just have to mention.
Yeah, I can't believe you found food in Tarzan.
Tarzan came up in a previous podcast, and I remember Tarzan eating cooked meat for the first time when he meets other humans. And I remember, again,
a bit
salivating over the cooked
a bit
meat.
About exactly a nice barbecued piece of meat or a nice fried piece of meat is a very, suggestive
Yes.
thing. And so from there, we're going to start today with a poem, which is also about recollection of early years and food. And this is by Nikki Giovanni, a very famous African American poet who passed 2 years ago. Her most famous poem is called Nikki Rosa, which is about also about her childhood and about how she was hoping that no white biographer American would write about her childhood because they wouldn't understand that black wealth is black love. And so about a childhood that was not rich at all, actually quite poor, and yet very happy. And this one is called Bay Leaves. I watched mommy cook, though I cooked with grandmother. With grandmother, I learned to pluck chickens, peel carrots, turn chitlins inside out, scrub pig feet. With mommy, I watched leftovers for stew or vegetable soup, great northern beans, mixed collards, turnips, and mustard greens, garlic cloves, bay leaves, very beautifully green, stiff, so fresh, with just a pinch of salt. Not everything together, but all the time keeping everything. I make my own frontier soup in a crock pot. I make my own ice cream with a pinch of salt, and everything else with garlic. But fresh bay leaves are only for very special oxtails.
It's a really lovely poem.
And I love oxtail.
Really?
That's one of my favorite foods.
Wow. So what does that poem mean to you? What does it evoke?
I think that this poem is also about a lady who is thinking back to her childhood and the spices and the small things like Bailey's, a pinch of salt, like it's very small things, but also something significant, which is that she watched her mother save food, but she cooked with her grandmother.
Yes.
And that tells you a lot about her family and about, how she grew up. And I think the issue with women cooking and food is a very potent one, very important one, and one that we find in literature quite often. So we're going to start with our first book, Ella.
Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel, which is a fantastic novel which we both read in our younger days and we both reread for this podcast, which has been a really interesting experience because it's a book about a young woman who is in love with Pedro. She's called Tita, and she is doomed to not marry him because she's been told by her mother that she must look after her mother until her mother's dying day, and her fate is to remain unmarried.
Because she's the last born.
Yes.
Girl.
In a matriarchal society. And she is an incredible cook, and Tita, and she pours all her emotions into the food that she cooks. So there's throughout the book, it's done in months. Each chapter is a month of her life, and each chapter describes a particular recipe where we go into great detail about what she cooks and how she cooks it. And they're often quite extravagant, a bit like the ones that I used to make with my mum, because they sort of have 17 eggs and 20 quails and 8 pounds of butter, etc. So they're very rich and creamy and delicious, and they're all often created from scratch. And Tita pours all her emotions into this book, into the food, which then other people eat, and they feel the emotions that she is putting into the food. This is from one of the scenes, which is from March. So it's the third chapter of the novel. And it's about one of her sisters called Gertrudis. And this is her moment when something magical happens to her because of food. The only thing that kept her going was the image of the refreshing shower ahead of her. But unfortunately, she was never able to enjoy it because the drops that fell from the shower never made it to her body. They evaporated before they reached her. Her body was giving off so much heat that the wooden walls began to split and burst into flame. Terrified, she thought she would be burnt to death, and she ran out of the little enclosure just as she was, completely naked. By then, the scent of roses given off by her body had travelled a long, long way, all the way to town, where the rebel forces and the federal troops were engaged in a fierce battle. One man stood head and shoulders above the others for his valour. It was the rebel who Gertrudis had seen in the plaza in Piedras Negras the week before. A pink cloud floated towards him, wrapped itself around him, and made him set out at a gallop towards Mama Elena's ranch. Juan, for that was the soldier's name, abandoned the field of battle, leaving an enemy soldier not quite dead, without knowing why he did so. A higher power was controlling his actions. He was moved by a strong urge to arrive as quickly as possible at a meeting with someone unknown in some undetermined place. But it wasn't hard to find. The aroma from Gertrudis's body guided him. He got there just in time to find her racing through the field. Then he knew why he'd been drawn there. This woman desperately needed a man to quench the red-hot fire that was raging inside her.
This book is a wonderful book. Ella will talk about the ending in a second. But the thing that's interesting about it is that it's about a matriarchal society. So this is Mexico at the turn of the 20th century, where politically it is quite in upheaval, and it's also about these women who are surviving on their own. There's no men. The men are either dead or gone, and they do everything themselves. They own land, and they're able to grow everything themselves, from the ingredients to actually make matches. I mean, it's quite extraordinary when you hear about everything they can do. How to keep eggs over a season, keep them fresh, like all kinds of but
lots of useful information,
lots
like
of
ways
useful
of
information.
burying
Yes,
eggs to keep them.
and also how to cook beans with baking powder, which something I knew from my own childhood as well, to keep the color. But really, what comes through is also how the cruelty of women towards each other. It's like why would a mother want her daughter to never know love and to keep her? Is it a way of protecting her from something, or is it because of the mother's own disappointment in love? And then she's been turned barren. I mean, it's about the harshness of life and what it does to women in such a society. We're going to talk after this book about another book which is quite similar to it, called Sissy, which is a Haitian book, contemporary book from 2020. But what happens when women like this, who had land, were able to grow their food and have a level of independence? Of course, they always yearned for love and yearned for a man. To people like this who move to the city with nothing because of erosion, because of changing laws in terms of ownership, because of wars and civil wars, end up in the city with nothing. And what happens to them then, because what held them together was that whole process of feeding themselves, their families, their workers on the ranch. That was not just about food, it was about a whole life. And that life, this was about discipline, was about obeying orders. You had to obey the mother. And what happens if you don't? And the fear of the mother. And at the same time, the mother being an incomplete being because her love has been torn from her because of racist reasons. She's not allowed to be with the man that she loved.
Yes. I think the mother's being just entirely selfish, personally. She just wants a slave to draw her bath every morning. So there's a lot of detail about how she makes tea to serve her and, pamper her. And really, she's a bit of a glorified servant. So I think it's interesting that you're wondering if it might be partly to do with her, the mother, kind of getting revenge on masculinity in a way, or, deprived femininity as well.
And then it goes into the food.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
the food becomes the receptor for all that sensuous, for all those senses that are being starved.
Yes.
The end of this book is very romantic. And when we were young, we thought, oh my God, this is the best ending ever.
Yes. And we were talking about how going back to the book as older people, we had a completely different view of the ending, and we're actually really disappointed and rather sad about the ending. But when we both read it as younger women, we thought, oh, it's so romantic and so lovely, and isn't it appropriate that it ended like that? We won't give it away.
Because the point is, again, about this matriarchy and these women who have so much desire in them, but at the same time, so much naivete in a way about men and life. that that's why the ending doesn't work anymore, because you think now we've learned, you know what a good relationship should be.
Yes,
But in this book, it doesn't happen.
that's true. But I must say, as a fiction prescription,
Hmm.
I still think it's brilliant for anyone that is experiencing unrequited love
Yes.
in any form.
And who wants to express their love in ways other than just speech or, action. This is done through food.
Yes.
And it's an amazing, and food as a communication tool, because how, I mean, my father is like this, for example. He communicates through food. My father is an amazing cook, and that's how he expresses his love for us, is through food.
Mm. So you said it very much related in some of the ways that food is
Yes, so this is
discussed
a
to
perversion
Sese.
of food, actually. So Sese
Mm.
is highly recommended. It's gripping. So it's a story of a young girl, and she also grows up with her grandmother, because her mother dies when she's 2 years old, and her grandmother has a food shop, a take. Let's kind of counter, a takeaway counter in the slum in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince. The slum in this story is called the City of Divine Power. And the grandmother's been living there forever. She was one of the first residents. It was just a barren land not far from the sea, around the harbor of Port-au-Prince. And she built her house there. She wasn't even sure if she owned the land, but she thought she did. And there was nobody around for 500 meters around her. And then suddenly all these people came from the countryside, because they had gone bust, for the reasons I had explained earlier. And suddenly the government took no notice, no interest in what was going on there. And so this city mushroomed out of nothing, with no running water, no electricity, no infrastructure whatsoever, just a couple of little alleyways in between the shacks to link, the different corners to each other, no trees. And so people live there in a state of yeah, it's dirty, it smells, it's noisy, and it's run by gangs. And the piece I want to read is about the grandmother having a problem, because at some point, sometimes they had electricity, sometimes they don't. How does she keep her food fresh for her takeaway, which is her livelihood? Bethlehem was the closest city to divine power, an enemy territory. At one time, worth a short lived alliance between Mackensen and Freddie. But now the neighborhoods kept their distance, and everyone carried a weapon, sleeves as they called them. Gang members killed each other, often on outrageous pretexts. One of the bloodiest face offs happened because Fanfan le Sauvage had started a rumor that all the members of Mackensen's gang were queer. For them, it was the worst insult possible. Even queers were against queerness. They were, in fact, the most vehement radical in their opposition. The inhabitants of the two cities had gone almost 2 weeks stuck inside their homes. Grandma, that's the grandmother, had to throw the pork she had bought for her business to the dogs. God only knows how long she tried to hold on to it, insisting that if she added enough spice, customers might still notice it was a little rank, but would resign themselves to it. It wouldn't be the first time, and she'd compensate with larger portions at the same price. After 8 days, old Nestor called on the phone to ask if there was a corpse in the house. Grandma had been so annoyed that she was about to explain to him how certain body parts of the living can give off bad smells too, and that he should check out his own home, but changed her mind. The smell was starting to bother her as well. She boiled the meat inside the bedroom, and we ate of it as much as we could. Tonton and I both got sick. By day 12, the meat had become crumbly, inedible.
Ew, that's grim, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's like the opposite of like water for chocolate, where the food is so delicious, so
Mm.
fresh, so organic. It's all been grown and with enormous amounts of labor and love. And here, the labor is there and the love is there, but the circumstances are so horrible that this is the perversion that happens, and the food is rotten, and you have
Yes.
to eat this rotten food with that she keeps spicing to see if it will hide it. And now it's really just, and they've lost their income now for a number of days.
And there's a lot of descriptions of cadavers in the street and
Yes.
dead bodies and rats.
It's a very hard book, but it's gripping. You cannot put it down. And the main
Mm.
character is so, her name is Sissy. She is so compelling. She's a young girl. She's only 12. She's small for her age from malnutrition and from her mother having been a junkie during her
Mhm.
pregnancy. And yet she's so full of life. She's fiery, she's feisty, she's fighting. She makes friends with the gang leaders so she can survive. And so in spite of all the horrible circumstances here and through the food, you see how horrible it is. You still get hope that, something may crack through.
Yes, and she's laughing in her bed while listening to the gunfire outside. She's a real great spirit. And I think as a fiction prescription, it's a really good example of surviving against all odds in the worst
Seriously. Yeah.
awful
Seriously,
circumstances.
how life always tries to shine through
Yeah, and it is a really good
because it's
read.
really bad circumstances.
Yeah,
And unfortunately
unbelievable.
Haiti, I mean, this book is about 5, 6 years old, and Haiti has not yet improved.
No.
But the good news is that Haiti, just as a side comment, is in the World Cup.
Yay.
First time 52 years. And there is a match
Brilliant.
against Scotland. And
Wow.
it will be a chance for a lot of Haitian food in London.
Excellent.
So yes.
Yeah, it's a very eye-opening novel, that one. So moving on to a different kind of hunger and thirst and attitude to food. This is Claire Fuller's latest novel, Hunger and Thirst, which is a fascinating novel about a young girl who's brought up in care. And she, from a very early age, has an intense relationship with starvation because her mother dies in awful circumstances. And during the period that her mother dies, Ursula, as she's named, is stuck with nothing to eat for a long period. And she's reduced to eating flies.
Oh, wow.
Such is her desperation in Morocco, because they're staying in a boarding house and she gets stuck in this little bathroom. So the flies are a theme that go on through the book in a very interesting way. It's quite a dark gothic novel where mysterious and strange things happen. It's quite ghostly. But Ursula becomes a highly successful artist. She renames herself Usha because she needs to escape the events of the past. And we know from the beginning that she was involved in a murder. And there's a documentary film being made about that murder, which is called Dark Descent.
Oh, it's a real murder that happened.
No.
Okay, this is in the book.
It's fiction.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is a parallel story that's running through the book that we're discovering what we find out through the documentary, which is about her life. So it's very cleverly put together as a plot, and it's an absolute gripper that keeps you awake all night.
And the hunger, is it also like a metaphysical hunger, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a hunger for love and for success, really, because she's come from this very terrible background with absolutely nothing and no hope. But she realizes as a teenager that she has an amazing skill for sculpture. And she starts carving things in the backyard of this place where she's squatting. And one of the sculptures created by Ursula is called the Lithopedion, and it's a sculpture of a giant bear with a calcified fetus inside it. And the fetus is actually a human fetus in this sculpture, but it refers to this terrible phenomenon of lithopedia, a medical condition where a baby in the womb calcifies and it gets more and more layers of calcium around it until it's effectively a stone baby. And some people it's happened to, and they've actually discovered the baby 30 or 40 years later, still in the womb. Honestly, it's a real thing. So it's not so much food as creativity calcified, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So I do think this book is kind of all about different kinds of nourishment, not directly food. There are interesting meals within the book, and Ursula is just constantly hungry in the book, and she eats a lot of toast, actually. But so it's not a book that's celebrating food, but it's a book that's about hunger and other forms of nourishment.
Interesting.
From there, we were going to move to
more murder and food.
More murder and darkness in food. So The Debt to Pleasure by John Lanchester, which is a fantastic book. And he's got a new book out at the moment called Look What You Made Me Do, which I haven't read yet, but it looks great. So The Debt to Pleasure is shown as if it's a recipe book. So the introduction is the narrator, who's called Tarquin Wino, or Winot, who is writing this supposed recipe book about all his favorite recipes. But he's a very long-winded and diversionary writer who keeps going off into different themes. And a bit like Water for Chocolate, it's written in not months, but seasons. So we start in winter, then we have spring, summer, autumn. And the book follows Tarquin on his journey to France. We keep getting memories of what has happened to him in his life and the way that his recipes reflect on what happened in his life. And we slowly realize that he is a very unreliable narrator. And all these wonderful recipes that he's creating, which are traditional recipes, but things like omelettes and roast dishes and shepherd's pie, etc., often have a bit of a sinister side to them. And it slowly becomes clear that there's been a few murders
through his food,
his life, which are probably related to the food. And it's all moving towards a dramatic conclusion. And it's a really fun read. I loved it because it's actually very funny. I found it completely gripping. It is one of those books where it keeps weaving into different stories, but you're just hooked by the cleverness of his descriptions and language,
that sounds
and
amazing.
The recipes which are in there too.
Yeah, the poison is mushrooms, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting also, I mean, as a comment between such a story and this one, because and Sissy as well, which is the very different take between men and women and recipes and what they mean. So, for example, I think when we talk about Like Water for Chocolate and Sissy, where you have these kind of omnipresent and omnipowerful older women who are kind of oppressing the younger women, forcing them to find a way of expressing themselves through food, for example. And what does that have to do with feminism? And how does feminism penetrate such a space? Whereas with the men, you see, it's much more direct. It's more like, okay, this is a tool that we can use for seduction, for killing, you know? Whereas with the women, you do wonder, why did feminism try to actually get you out of the kitchen so much?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because in these stories, the women are independent. They have to be. No one's going to support them. And the only way they're independent is by being in the kitchen. Sis's case, the grandmother, because that's how she makes her living. Tita's case here is because that is her only way of self-expression. And she's required to do it for her family. And the kitchen also in Like Water for Chocolate becomes also a laboratory for remedies. That is also where there's a character whose grandmother is a Native Indian, and that's where she, discovers herbs. She tries to develop remedies for disease and for illnesses. So I think that's an interesting question of why did feminism ultimately try to take the women out of the kitchen? What was the point in that? To accomplish what exactly? Was it to break women's power, actually? Because that was an area that women already controlled, to gain a power that maybe was not so clear? I don't know. It's an interesting question, I think, that food has a lot to do with.
Absolutely. And in the John Lanchester novel, there's a very male approach to food, which is being a show-off. Mm-hmm. He's an absolute show-off, this Tarquin. And also, he's not only showing off his incredible gastronomic knowledge, he's always mansplaining everything about different types of mushrooms, etc. But also, he's showing off his cleverness in how he manages to get rid of
Yeah, it's
people
not part
that
of it's
he
not
doesn't
part of a
like.
system.
No.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is Babette's Feast, which is a short story by Karen Blixen, very famous Danish author, which again goes back to that idea of food, women, a system, a community.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful story which has been made into a film. And it's about two
Is the film
sisters.
good? I can't remember the
It
film.
is good.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I recommend it.
Okay.
So this is a story about two sisters who live in a very deprived community in Denmark. And they, in their youth, got many offers of love from suitors, but they both decided to devote themselves to their father and the religious community that he lived in. And one day they take in a French refugee who's fled from Paris in 1871 in one of the French revolutions. And it's about this woman that escapes from France and she goes to stay with the two sisters in Denmark. And they don't know anything about her history, but they take her in out of, goodwill. And she becomes their maid. And one day she miraculously wins the lottery. And everyone imagines that she will go back to France, where she came from. But instead, she says, I just have one wish, and that's to create an incredible French feast so that I can show you where I come from and what the food is like. She then creates this absolutely incredible feast, which is full of cooked turtle and oysters and wonderful birds and everything stuffed within other birds. And it's made for this tiny religious community of only about 20 people. And they're all a bit horrified by the extravagance and feel like, surely we can't eat all this. It's sinful. And they all decide, oh, we're hardly going to eat anything because it's just too luxurious. But then when they sit down for the feast, they slowly lose their inhibitions and begin to eat. And they begin to experience forgiveness of each other, and all their little petty arguments that they've had over the years disappear, and they give in to the sensuality of the food and they love it, and everyone comes together in a beautiful, harmonious fashion. And it's just a really gorgeous expression of the great qualities of food bringing people together.
Yes, and it's a wonderful story about the generosity that comes through food, the selflessness, and how it can be an act of pure giving. And how it was interesting because in that community, which was poor and living in a country where winter, is quite rough, and so they were not used to a lot of lavishness, because they don't have a lot of material to be lavish with, and they're quite Protestant, and how this gift that she makes opens their hearts. And the grace in the story is, I think, what makes that story so lasting.
Yes, I think of all the stories and books that we're discussing today, it's the one that's most purely celebratory and joyful in terms of how food can bring everyone together. And it, as you say, it's a pure, generous gift from the heart. And it turns out that Babette, who is the heroine, used to be the top chef in a very famous restaurant in Paris. I think it's called the Café Anglais. And everyone realizes after the feast that she's blown the entire lottery winnings on this one feast. So it's just completely an act of generosity. Really lovely story.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah. And a great fiction prescription for the idea of bringing everyone together. And it makes you want to create incredible feasts and have
It
all your
does,
friends
because
around.
because you see that an incredible feast is such a great way of letting go as well, right? I mean, you could go into arguments and discussions with your family members forever about whatever, disagreements you've had, or you can cook them something amazing and have a good time.
Yes, and bring everyone back together
Yeah.
through the food. So one other short story we want to mention is Italo Calvino's The Distance of the Moon, Calvino's one of my all-time favorite authors, and this collection, which is called Cosmic Comics, is so fabulous that I've actually created a series of paintings based on it. So this story, The Distance of the Moon, is about a time when the moon was so close to Earth that people could put a ladder up to the moon, go up the ladder, and then collect moon milk. And the moon milk in the story is never really described what it tastes like, but it's a sort of magical substance that everyone wants. And it's almost as if the moon represents a motherhood, a beneficent mother giving of herself. And actually,
Or a giant ice cream ball.
yeah,
A
or
giant
a giant
scoop.
boob.
A giant boob. Yes. Yes, that's true too. It made me feel like the moon was like the best vanilla ice cream scoop ever.
Yeah, it is lovely. And everyone almost is milking the moon when they go up there. But what's really lovely about the story is it brings everyone together in their shared desire to get to the moon. And they have various difficult ways of getting to the moon. But also, what we both really love about it is the way it's written. So I'm just going to read a little bit to give you a taste of the beauty of the writing. The spot where the moon was lowest as she went by was off the zinc cliffs. We used to go out with those little rowing boats they had in those days, round and flat, made of cork. They held quite a few of us, me, Captain Vudvud, his wife, my deaf cousin, and sometimes little Zilth. She was 12 or so at that time. On those nights, the water was very calm, so silvery it looked like mercury, and the fish in it, violet-coloured, unable to resist the moon's attraction, rose to the surface. All of them, and so did the octopuses and the saffron medusas. There was always a flight of tiny creatures, little crabs, squid, and even some weeds, light and flimsy, and coral plants, that broke from the sea and ended up on the moon, hanging down from that lime-white ceiling, or else they stayed in mid-air, a phosphorescent swarm we had to drive off, waving banana leaves at them. So lovely. The whole story is
The
full of these
writing.
incredible images.
The writing is beautiful. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of food is interesting in that sense as fiction prescriptions, right? Because food is a different way of communication. It's not writing. It's not literature. It's not the senses you need for food are not the same. It's your taste. It is your eyes, but it is also your taste. It is also your touch. You know, like and I think it's always incredible to find how writers translate food into words.
Mm.
And it varies so much from women to men, from culture to culture. And so when we find something, I mean, Calvino was beautiful in this, and we thought it would be, yeah.
Yeah, and also it's really interesting to think about how different readers respond to different stories and descriptions about food.
Descriptions about food, and how it relates back to what we think of food. If food is our luxury, our security, our necessity, I mean, it's all these things, right? But it's what actually comes up.
Yes, and for many people, it's their love language, how they create food for people. And I think it does have a huge effect, reading about food, on how you are as a food maker or food giver. Because actually, Babette's Feast is a story I read quite young, and it made me love all the more that idea of being a
And it related you
beneficent.
back to your mom too, right? I mean,
Yes,
in terms of knowing what a feast is worth.
Yeah, the eternal feast.
Whereas I had a shock because we were speaking last night with my daughter, and Ella asked her, so what are your memory of your mom's food? And she said, my mom used to basically put a piece of cod in the oven and feed it to us with cream spinach.
Every day.
Every day. And I was like, that's so not true.
That's her memory. I know.
So exactly, you think, what you don't know how all of this conveys. And hopefully in a couple of years, while she's living on her own and working and eating out of, a supermarket, frozen food, she will come to reconsider her memories.
And hopefully appreciate that cream spinach. Makes me wonder what my kids are going to say about my food.
Thank you so much for listening. This was Fiction Prescriptions, our episode about food. Please tune in next time.
Which is going to be all about superstitions.
Very, very exciting.
And we would love you to send in any questions that you might have relating to superstitions in fiction.
Yes, yes. So I'm Isabelle Dupuy.
And I'm Ella Berthoud. Thank you.
Thank you.